good morning, everyone. I know we're running a little behind schedule, and I've got a lot of slides, so I'm going to try to navigate quickly through some of these and kind of focus the conversation on the things where I think there'll be more value-add takeaways. So before we get started, I'm just kind of curious to know how many folks in the room have dealt with an uncomfortable issue in social media for their brand or maybe for some other cause. A couple hands. Does it feel pretty scary to deal with something like this? Yeah, a couple head nods. Yeah, it's we've had a lot of interesting situations over the past year or so, and different issues that we've encountered. And from our experience, we found that while they can certainly be uncomfortable, they also offer us some really great opportunities to talk about the value and importance of social media within our organization, as well as demonstrate how we can leverage some of that real-time data and quickly sort of turn a situation around and, in some instances, use it to our advantage to help get stories across and really help kind of amplify that and kind of ignite some of our online advocates that are already out there talking about our brand. So let me get started. This is the slide. I think everybody in the room cares about social media. My point with sharing this slide is the fact that there may be others in your organization who are sort of struggling with what the business value is and why should we care. So that's why I wanted to share this with you. And a couple key points. The first is that everybody's mobile. They're either carrying around an iPhone, a Droid, or a BlackBerry. And so through that, they're instantaneously sharing their experiences with others. And that is becoming part of a global conversation that people can look for and search and learn about. There's an interesting statistic from Mary Meeker at Morgan Stanley recently I heard at a conference that by 2012, which is technically a year and a half away, new shipments for PCs would be, or I guess new shipments for smartphones will exceed new shipments for PCs. So if you think about that, more people are going to be relying and using their mobile devices for communications and for other activities they might have traditionally used on a laptop. That's really sort of a big change to consider. The other point, as I mentioned, that kind of goes into this, everyone's mobile, is that they're sharing their experiences and opinions instantaneously. And that is not just a part of a conversation with their friends, but it is searchable content. Because for the most part, it's public, it's easily accessible. And the last point, search drives awareness and relevance. When a lot of people think about search, they're probably thinking about Google. But the fact that the social search space is huge. YouTube cites itself as being the second most popular search site. Twitter gets around 600 million search hits a day. And then there's Facebook, which is really trying to be a destination for search. So a lot of conversations that are happening within the social space, people are searching for that content within the social space. And so you want to make sure that your brand's viewpoints and information and response to different issues are a part of those search results. So I'm going to start off a little bit by talking about some of our initial experiences jumping into the social conversation. And so I'm going to title this Jumping into the Storm, which literally is what we did. Close to 2 years ago, there were some really severe snowstorms that kind of crippled the Northwest. And this happened around Christmas. And what people are doing during the holidays is when they can't celebrate with their loved ones, they're shipping their gifts. And so it hit all the shipping companies because the transportation infrastructure was really disabled. I mean, the roadways, a lot of different ways, roads and systems that we rely upon to travel were all impacted. Well, UPS tends to carry a lot of those holiday shipments. So there was a lot of conversation happening about our brand and people struggling to try to get information about where are my holiday shipments. A lot of emotions tied to this. Prior to this instance, we've been having quite a lot of conversations with our customer service folks and talking with them about how we needed to set up a protocol to be able to take customer concerns that we encounter online and take care of those customers in an offline environment so that we were guiding our ability to serve them and being able to make that response more public. And this sort of became our jumping off point. We had that protocol in place and we used this instance to start actively doing some customer outreach through our monitoring. And this was extremely helpful because these were customer concerns that were now driving media stories. So from sitting in a PR seat, I could say, hey, this is a media issue. So I need to take care of customers because that's what's driving media interest. So over the past year and a half, one of our key focuses within social media has been driving conversation in Twitter, and primarily around customer service, because we are a service company. We're delivering 15 million packages a day, so that's technically 15 million experiences that people are having with their brand. And for the most part, they're really positive. But sometimes people aren't happy. There may be things that we've disappointed them with. So what we found is we wanted to ensure that we were demonstrating, we were adding value to the channel, that we were paying attention to the conversations and what mattered to people most. People love their UPS driver. We want to make sure that we extend that affinity that they have for our brand to the customer service experience. And so these are a couple of folks that we have right now online doing customer support, and we are looking to add more voices out there from our very awesome customer service staff. I consider the Uber customer service folks that are part of this effort. And this is a big point, something that I talk about internally. It's the fact that for the customers that we connect with, they have generated over 550,000 positive impressions for our brand. Not something we've asked them to do, but when they thank us online. So people that have seen their experience and seen their griping now see the fact that UPS has responded, and responded in a way that has satisfied their concern and made that person who was a brand basher now become someone who is a brand advocate and is really sharing that experience with others. And that's all searchable content. And then I just thought this was interesting too, because some folks are motivated to blog about the positive experience that they've had with us. And so that's always great for us to see, is that we're tapping into a need and really enriching a relationship that people have with our brand. So this is an interesting situation, and something that I talked about last year. This is a campaign that started in June of 2009. This is over some legislative policies, specifically some labor regulations. And it's something where our competitor, FedEx, had started a campaign to paint UPS as being a company that is sort of, going to benefit if there are some changes in this labor legislation. In actuality, they're the only delivery company exempt from some of the same labor laws that all other delivery companies have. But they chose to sort of position their viewpoint very aggressively in a social media campaign. They have this site that they launched, and they did a lot of traditional media outreach and a lot of social media outreach. And it's something that obviously caught the attention and concern of people across our company, particularly our executives. And so what we did is, this was an opportunity for us to really demonstrate the ability of using real-time data to analyze the conversation that was going on, look at what the reaction and sort of the growth is in the conversation that FedEx might be generating around this particular topic, how online audiences were responding, and what were really the trigger points for any kind of conversation happening. So it's just a couple examples of some things. And we started responding. We were responding through Twitter to folks that were, talking about this topic and not really clear about what the true issues were that were happening. And a couple things that we found out, I'll get to that point in a minute, is that while social was a space where FedEx was focusing a lot of their efforts, what was triggering some of the conversation related more to news stories. So every time we would see like a news story pop up out there, that tended to trigger more conversation. And the other thing that we saw was that over time, the initial interest that had been generated started dying off. And so there wasn't a real sustained interest in conversation happening around this topic. And they've employed some different channels over the course of the time, because this legislation is still in consideration. So they've used different channels in looking at ways to kind of continue to energize the conversation that's going on. But it's interesting, because not often do you see one company attack another in such a public space. And there were certainly things that we responded to outside of Twitter when we were monitoring blogs and looking for stories. So, you know, this is an instance here where there was a story at Huffington Post, attracted a lot of commentary, and so obviously I'm going to jump in. And part of my point here is being able to make sure that people had accurate information about what this was about and pointing them to resources and making sure that our side of the story and what we viewed from an industry perspective was happening was understood in a way that people could relate to. We'd also had some instances where an employee had addressed some, raised some allegations around a letter writing campaign that both our companies had invited our employees to participate in, both when I mean UPS and FedEx. So again, I responded to that and let people know that, hey, just like FedEx, UPS invited its employees to share their views on this particular topic with their Congress representatives. And again, letting people know some of these specifics about this issue that was in consideration and how it related both to UPS and FedEx, and then pointing them to resources where they could find more information about it. Now, certainly there are things that we didn't respond to, and so that's one of the things I wanted to talk about, is you don't have to respond to everything. This was a story at Politico that came out last July, and it was talking about some allegations around sort of a pay-for-play relation to support. A huge amount of commentary that happened at this particular blog. I decided not to respond to this in the comment thread because, quite frankly, a lot of the conversation started to form around lobbying in general, viewpoints on that, and viewpoints on the current administration, and on unions in general. So the conversation really didn't always stay focused around the labor issues that were affecting UPS and FedEx. They were going to broader issues, and people were sort of standing on their soapboxes or digital soapboxes and talking about their particular opinions. And anything I would have said in here would have gotten lost in the whole conversation because people were interested more in getting their viewpoint across than maybe necessarily what I was going to say. And the conversation died out in about 24 hours. This was a blogger who took FedEx to task on how they were using social to talk about their viewpoints on this particular issue. So this is an instance where I didn't really need to respond because he had done a job that we thought, hey, we agree with what you're saying here and what you're pointing out. And then Brown Cafe. This is an unofficial UPS employee site. It's a place where some of our employees have conversations about their experience within the company and obviously news that is impacting the company. Again, not a place where I necessarily needed to lend my voice. It was a place where employees were talking about the issue and sharing their own perspective. So back in January, there was the earthquake that hit Haiti, and it ignited a lot of compassion for people, seeing the horrific pictures and the stories that were coming out from that country. A lot of brands were caught in a spiral of online rumors, airlines that they were flying doctors and nurses for free into Haiti. UPS was one of the brands that got caught in the rumor mill. And the rumor about us, and this came out less than 24 hours after the news of the earthquake, is that we were shipping any package 50 pounds or less for free to Haiti. Well, guess what? Nobody was shipping to Haiti. There were no roads to drive. There were no landing rights for planes, and the shipping ports were destroyed because of the damage from the earthquake. But people were motivated by compassion, and we were concerned about this because we have 4,300 UPS store locations. The last thing we want to see are folks motivated by concern showing up at UPS store locations with their packages of gently worn clothes or canned food and finding out that they can't ship to Haiti and they're not going to get to ship free to Haiti. So we quickly saw this rumor kind of spiraling on Twitter and worked hard to respond. And the first thing we did is we had just recently launched a blog, and so we used this as a place for our official response to be able to direct people to. And we had 3 things that we wanted to accomplish here. First of all, we wanted to let them know the rumor is not true, but we've given $1 million in aid, and then we wanted to tell people, here's how you can help, because we recognize that there was a lot of compassion that was driving this activity. And so we wanted to give people information that would enable them to respond in ways that were responsive and that would truly get the right type of care to the folks in Haiti. And then we hit Twitter hard. And our goal was within 120 characters to be able to get those 3 points across. That first, the rumor's not true, we gave $1 million in aid, and learn more on how you can help. And having a link in there. We wanted to keep this small because we wanted people to have the ability to retweet it, because we recognize, you know, the 3 of us who are out there are not going to reach everybody that's having that conversation. So we need to tap into folks that we're responding to and asking them to share this information on our behalf. And one of the things that we were able to share from our experience in this, in less than 24 hours, over 900,000 impressions were generated in Twitter in response to this rumor. We found that for every 1 person who saw the rumor, over 20 people saw our response. And that is a result of being able to provide information to advocates and encouraging them to pass that along to their friends. Our blog was also incredibly helpful because the next day, as the media obviously was continuing to report on events in Haiti, they were also reporting on rumors that were taking place about brands. And they were quoting statements from our blog and in some instances linking back to it. So, you know, we didn't have to handle a flood of media inquiries coming in or doing outreach to the media. They were finding that information we made available at our blog. And what was great too is that, you know, organizations like the Salvation Army even wrote a blog story about the fact that this rumor about UPS was not true. So, you know, we had champions out there from other aid organizations that were helping get that message across for us. And so that's just an example of how folks in Twitter were thanking us and being sure to pass that information along to their friends. The other thing that was great is we were doing, you know, like a lot of companies, we were obviously dedicating a lot of resources into Haiti. Being a shipping and logistics company, we have expertise in the areas of the movements of goods. And we were very much involved with the UN, with CARE, with the Red Cross in helping to respond to this situation by working with them through their global distribution centers where they have aid stationed and moving that across borders and getting it staged into the Dominican Republic so that it could go across the border there and get to their aid facilities within Haiti that they were setting up. And so the attention that was generated around this rumor also then created interest and awareness for the other things that we were doing and how UPS employees personally were involved in responding to the needs for the folks in Haiti. And so that just helped amplify awareness and interest around some of the good things that we were doing in response to the disaster. So the last example I wanted to share with you, because I think this is pretty interesting, is around the iPad launch. UPS was involved with delivering the iPad during the US launch and also in Europe. And we knew that Apple customers are very tech savvy, they are very vocal, and so we were expecting that a lot of conversation was naturally going to take place around the excitement with the iPad launch. And so we had, you know, kind of set up and got prepared to be able to track that conversation to make sure that we understood what people were talking about in relation to the delivery experience that they were having around the iPad, because we knew that for some folks they were going to be hitting that, you know, update button regularly on their UPS tracking page, wanting to track, you know, every step of the way that their newest toy was traveling within our system. But what we found is that for some folks, some of the messages at UPS.com tracking were actually generating a confusion. And so we wanted to make sure that we kind of helped relieve some of that anxiety that was unfortunately being triggered and ensuring that people had the confidence that their special delivery was going to make it on time. So, you know, we worked in Twitter, responding to folks, we answered questions, and our goal here was really to relieve the anxiety that people were experiencing because they wanted that assurance that, even though there's something at UPS.com, I might not understand that message, I'm hearing from Thomas or Mike or other folks knowing that, my shipment indeed is going to arrive on time. And, even the New York Times was, in their Bits blog, were covering it, people stationed all across the country covering the iPad release at Apple stores. And we're talking about the fact that we were out there over the weekend responding to customers and celebrating with them, and the UPS driver actually delivered their iPad, and people were uploading videos of the delivery experience and unboxing videos, and it was really great. And then what we did is we also responded on our blog because we were so active in responding to consumers around this delivery online. We wanted to let them know, what did we learn from the conversations they shared with us, and how did we take those insights and respond to them internally? So one of the points we made here is that, hey, we saw that there was confusion being triggered by messages we got at UPS.com. Well, we took that insight and shared it with our team so that they could respond accordingly and make adjustments to our tracking page so that that type of confusion wasn't continued. So it was a way for us to sort of be honest about some of the things that we realized kind of confuse people and how we use that information to respond, and the fact that we were really excited watching all of their tweets on iPad launch day and seeing all of the happiness that was being shared. And then this is just sort of a quick example of how we were tracking data. We're tracking conversation. We were feeding data on a daily basis, sometimes twice a day, to our customer solutions group, or BD, customer service, and technology, letting them know how the conversation was evolving during the day, giving them some data to understand when the peak points of conversation were happening. And that was really helpful to our BD team, because as they were continuing to talk with Apple throughout the course of this delivery experience, they had data in hand that they could then use to inform them for these customer conversations, so that they weren't really kind of kept in the dark and were unaware about what was happening. And so that was a way that we could deliver business intelligence to some key business teams and helping support them as they're managing the customer relationship. So a couple tips that I wanted to share with you from our learnings with defending your brand in social media. I'm going to turn to my notes here because I had some points I wanted to make sure I get across. So the first thing that I think is really important is to monitor now and understand the conversations that are happening about your brand, where they're taking place, and use it as a guide to determine, where do you add value? You want to be sure that the conversation is just not about the proactive and really sort of the promotional things that you want to get across from your brand, but that you're listening to what people are saying and how can you help inform those conversations, or how can you help support them. And use it as a way to build trust, build sincerity around your brand, so that when you do have an issue arrive, people are more likely to listen to you. They will be less skeptical about what your motives may be. And there is a lot of data that you can glean from these conversations. So the next point I had in here was, build a credible voice. Our focus around customer service was in response to the fact that we saw a lot of customer experience conversations happening. A lot of them really positive, but ones where people were frustrated or perhaps confused by information they'd gotten from UPS. So by building that trusted voice, again, people were more receptive to outreach we would share when there were issues that we wanted to respond that was triggering conversation. The next point would be training and empower your staff. Be sure that folks that are going to have a responsibility for outreach, whether they're spokespeople or whether they're folks in other areas of your organization like customer service, that they've got the proper information in place, and so they understand how to handle different types of conversations. You might have someone who is a critic, but they're making good points, versus someone who's just sort of a flamer and is arguing for the sake of arguing. And how do you manage those very different types of conversations and be successful? And give people the ability to engage right away. This is something where you can't go to legal for every response you want to be able to share, because you're going to miss out on the conversation taking place. And then know when to respond and when not to respond. Sometimes a response isn't always needed, so consider what what you'll be able to contribute and what value the bigger conversation gets from your participation. When you have an issue that is really big, sometimes you don't always have the ability to respond to every bit of conversation that's happening out there. So figure out where you can add the most value and where you will reach the biggest audience. And then my fifth point here is that issues can offer advantages. So this has been really helpful for us because all of the issues that I've shared with you here are things that can make people very uncomfortable, particularly if they're things that maybe our company hasn't quite experienced before. And so that gets the attention of executives and it makes them a little uncomfortable about how do we deal with this, particularly if they're not that familiar with social. So use it as an opportunity to have that conversation. Wrap your response and the information you can offer around data. Data, it's so easy to pull from this information. It is time intensive, but it is easy to pull. And use that to help build the business case, to build confidence, and to connect your leadership with understanding about the impact of this channel and how it can deliver value for your group. And as you're having that conversation, don't be shy about letting people know what you need, whether it's resources, it's tools, or it's staff. Make that a part of the conversation too. So that's it. That's my last slide.
That's great. Maybe one question before?
Yeah.
I have a question. You're talking about, you mentioned something about you don't have to bring in legal every time you apply. With that, how do you handle, say someone is a flamer and they're bad mouthing, say, I think it was just 3 of you, is that 3 of you managed?
For a lot of this, but we did have some other folks in our PR group that were also doing some selective responding.
How do you handle it? Say one of them does reply back and maybe they didn't handle it as gracefully as possible, maybe they took it a little too personally, and they responded back to someone who was just, just pointlessly attacking the brand.
Yeah, we had a good example of that recently, and we had with the UPS store. We had someone that was constantly tweeting them about, and using very colorful language, about how angry they were that they were charged to use tape to tape up a package that they were shipping at the UPS store. Well, our locations are individually owned and operated, so our franchisees do have a certain level of latitude on what they want to charge for. And how we responded to that is we did it in a way where we were sort of calling out their concern, letting them know that they were heard, and tried to make a little light of it so that people saw that we're responsive, but we're not going to sort of get into this argument with this particular person. And we basically said, we've heard you loud and clear. You don't want to pay to tape your package at the store. We're going to pass along your feedback, minus the colorful language, to our store owners. And that's it. He can continue responding all he wants, but people have seen that we've handled it, that we've tried to make a little light of the situation, use a little bit of good humor, without necessarily being disrespectful to him. So it's just thinking through how do you frame your response that's sort of appropriate in the channel, that's appropriate for your brand personality, but letting people know you might continue to want to talk about that, but we understand we're passing it along, and there's nothing more that we can really say to share with you. It's perfectly fine to say, on this particular point, we have to agree to disagree.
How did that person, did you say that person tweeted that complaint?
Oh yeah, lots of times.
Okay, so
Yeah, and I don't know if he said anything else. I haven't followed through on it, but it's just a way to sort of respond without, trying to keep the high ground.
I think one of them, and this might be better suited for the policy, whenever that is, but I meant like as far as, say, if someone, one of y'all replied back, how do you handle it, if you don't have to talk to legal every time, like, if you empower you to talk to these people, well, how do you handle it? If, say, someone stepped out of line a little bit too far, how do you handle that? That's, on your end, like if it was an employee, not necessarily like, if you're replying back and they kind of stepped out of line.
Sure. I mean, we can't control what others say about us, and the fact is, we're talking to customers every day, and we have hundreds of customer service reps on the phone talking to customers every day. We don't have a legal filter for every single conversation that's happening. Our legal group is an important partner because they provide us guidance around what's appropriate to share and the things that we need to stay away from, because there are some sensitivities involved with that. And so obviously we use those experiences to guide how we would manage our conversation. It's the same thing with the media calls us on the phone. We're not going to, you know, reach out to our legal group every time we get a phone call from the media. We have talking points and different communication guidelines that we've previously vetted with them, and that guides our conversation. Obviously, if there are things that are a little uncertain or sensitive that come up, we certainly reach out to our legal partners to get their perspective. But you know, the fact that we have smart people that care and serve for our customers every day at this brand, and we need to make sure that this is just another communication channel that we're enabling them to be in, and to be able to really shine and demonstrate that our company is here to serve the needs of our customers.
Okay, I think we're going to have to take a break now. I'm sorry, but Debbie will be here a while, right? A little while?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I have to head back.
Okay, we can work through email.